Hi, this is Dr. Will Tuttle, author of a book called The World Peace Diet, and I'm delighted to be able to share for a few minutes some of the reflections on the first precept, not to harm other living beings unnecessarily. So, my point of view on this whole thing is that as a Buddhist practitioner, that other living beings, non-human animals, are absolutely significant in their capacity to suffer, and that we are, as Buddhists and as human beings, called to take their interests as seriously as we would like our interests to be taken. So in my own story, my own case, I was born and raised in a typical family, eating the usual meals of lots of meat, dairy products, and eggs back in the 1950s in Concord, Massachusetts. I kind of grew up around the transcendentalists, Thoreau and Emerson and Alcott, and it's fascinating to see how they were influenced actually by the ancient Buddhist and Hindu traditions to move toward plant-based ways of eating. Alcott was kind of famous actually for his vegetarianism back in the 1840s, and he actually started the first vegan community in the United States called Fruitlands, where they wouldn't eat meat, dairy products, or eggs, or wear leather, or even cotton, because it came from slaves in the South in the 1840s. So some of that may have rubbed off on me at some point, but I remember it took quite a while. I worked in the summers on a beautiful little dairy farm nestled in the Green Mountains of Vermont as a teenager, and I killed my own chickens, and we killed the cows, the dairy cows, ourselves, because when their production would decline after only 5 years, even though they would live to be 25 years old, we would kill them. So I grew up understanding that animals have to be killed, and you have to cut their throats. I mean, that's what it was. We were doing that. And I didn't have a problem with it because I was completely indoctrinated into the narrative of our society that we are infinitely superior to animals, that they don't have a soul, they taste good. If you don't eat them, you're definitely going to die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency or a calcium deficiency. So that's just how it's set up. Fortunately for me, after I left college, which was in Maine in 1975, I decided to go on a spiritual pilgrimage with my younger brother, Ed, doing Ramana Maharshi's practice of self-inquiry and asking the question, who am I? We thought we would walk all the way to California, and we got as far as Buffalo, New York. After a few months, and we headed south. We actually walked all the way to Alabama, and we ended up at a Zen center in Alabama, in the Korean tradition in Huntsville, Alabama. But on the way, we stopped for a few weeks at a community called The Farm. And The Farm in 1975 was the largest hippie commune in the world. Started right in San Francisco with Stephen Gaskin and the Monday night class in Golden Gate Park. And there were 900 people living there, and they were all vegetarians. They said, we're vegetarians. We would today call them vegans. And they didn't eat any meat, dairy products, or eggs, wear any leather, many of them. And they did it for ethical reasons, to reduce harm to animals, and also because of hunger. They explained to me when I got there that most of the food we're growing on this planet we're feeding to the animals while people are going hungry, and that food shortages are the primary cause of conflict in the world, essentially the injustice. And so they were eating lower on the food chain so that there would be more peace in the world and more abundance for everyone. So that was it. That was it for me. I saw this example of 900 people. They were very deeply influenced by the Japanese Buddhist tradition. Stephen Gaskin was a student of Suzuki Roshi. And so that was part of it, was they were inspired by Buddhist practice and the 5 precepts, and also just by the environmental concerns and social justice concerns to eat a plant-based diet and way of living. So I became a vegetarian in 1975, and a few years later I was out here in San Francisco. I was living at the Tibetan Buddhist Center called KDK, and then also in studying Korean Buddhism. And I became a vegan in 1980 when I understood a little better the routine abuse of dairy cows and hens for their products. So I became a vegan just about 40 years ago now. And I always say the smartest thing I ever did. Really, it's been tremendous in terms of health and happiness and everything else. But I didn't do it for myself. I really did it for the animals. And a few years later, in 1984, I ended up deciding to go and become a Zen monk in Korea. So I shaved my head and took vows and was living in a monastery called Songwangsa in South Korea in the Choge order. And I discovered for the second time in my life I was in a vegan community. The whole community had been practicing what we would call veganism for about 770 years, something like that, since the 1200s. So there had been no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, silk, leather, fur, no harming of insects. That was essentially the practice of that monastery. And so when I came back to the States eventually, and I decided eventually to get a PhD at Berkeley and go on to other things, I felt like I had these roots of veganism that are really rooted not so much veganism as ahimsa. I think that's, in a way, a better word. The idea is non-harmfulness. This is basically what we're talking about, not just merely theorizing about it, but practicing it. And so when we look at the 5 precepts, the 5 basic precepts, we can see that all 5 of them we are routinely breaking when it comes to non-human animals. We're killing them, of course, by the millions every day, actually by the billions every day when we include marine animals for food. We're talking about trillions of animals every year that we're killing, according to the estimates. And so it's a massive industrialized killing machine that we support with just one thing, our votes, our dollar bills, right? That's what drives it. And so we're breaking the first precept because when I pay for animal-based foods, I'm paying someone somewhere to kill an animal. And they're doing it specifically for me. Even though that particular animal is not killed for me, I'm going to demand through my purchase that an animal be killed. And dairy is always killing. Eggs are always killing. You can't own other living beings without harming them. Even having the idea in my mind that I own a living being, that being is my property, that is also himsa. I understand this now, but before I didn't understand this. But living this and studying and practicing, it's really, to me, enormously liberating to see that the 5 precepts are really tools for awakening. So with animals, we're killing them, we're stealing from them, right? That's the whole point of animal agriculture, is we're stealing their flesh, we're stealing their milk, we're stealing their eggs, we're stealing their lives, we're stealing their time, we're stealing their children. We steal everything. We steal their purposes. And then besides killing and stealing, we're also sexually abusing them on a massive scale. You can't have animal agriculture without the sexual abuse of female animals and the stealing of their babies. On any animal agriculture operation, large or small, it's the same story. I own you, I own your baby, I'm going to kill your baby and impregnate you again, and steal your baby again, and kill your baby again, and then kill you. I mean, it's a rape and kill operation. Whether it's a large commercial operation or a small backyard operation, it's the same. And of course, deception is the 4th one, not to lie. And these animals are always being deceived as well. Of course, we're luring and deceiving fish, and we're deceiving these animals with slaughterhouse ramps that they don't know what they're going to. And then, of course, liquors and drugs, we're drugging them. There's over 10,000 different drugs and hormones that are inflicted on these animals without their permission, to harm them, to exploit them, to abuse them, to fatten them up for our use. So all 5 precepts we are breaking on a massive scale, and these animals are in our hands, they're vulnerable. So our practice, I feel, is to live the teachings. The beings that are in our hands, who are vulnerable in our hands, how do we treat them? This is the question. And the beautiful thing is we can discover that there are new nutrients that we need to be healthy that we have to harm animals to get. This is the great gift. We've all been given the gift of a physical body that does not require any animal to suffer to get all the nutrients that we need to be healthy. And having discovered that, then why would we harm animals unnecessarily? Just for our taste, or because we're afraid to be different? So the teachings, I think, are very clear on this, and it's great to see the awakening that's happening. Buddhism is about awakening, and I'm so grateful to be part of this awakening, and I want to thank all of you for caring and for being part of this exploration and awakening, and really the healing of our society and of ourselves as we awaken out of the delusion of seeing other living beings as mere property to be used by us. Thank you very much.